Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading Yourself podcast. Can you believe that we're already halfway through this year? Whether the past 6 months have flown by or they have felt like a marathon, now is the perfect time to hit pause and take stock. This episode is all about hitting that reset button, celebrating your progress, and setting yourself up for success in the months ahead. Today, I'm going to share with you a framework to do a mid-year reboot. So download the workbook that comes with this episode. You can find the link on the show notes of the podcast episode. Find a quiet spot and join me for a mid-year reboot that will leave you feeling recharged and ready to tackle the rest of the year with renewed energy and clarity. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Leading Yourself podcast. This is your host, Carolina de Arriba. I'm an HR professional, health and fitness coach, wife, mom, and above all things, a goal-getter. In this podcast, we're going to be digging into all things leadership, professional and career development, habits, and relationships. This is a podcast for those who want to become the best version of themselves. Those who have big dreams and are willing to embrace the journey and put in the work to achieve them. My goal is to share with you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you in your journey. So let's dig into today's episode. I am a personal fan of having regular check-ins. I believe that regular check-ins are essential for sustainable personal growth and well-being because there is no quote-unquote perfect path to success, to happiness, or to personal fulfillment. We can't predict a flawless route from the start and then run an autopilot to get there. If it was only that easy, right? And as we approach the midpoint of the year, I think it's a great opportunity to check in with your goals, with your habits, and with your overall direction. And offer yourself a chance to realign your focus, address your roadblocks, and ensure that you're staying true to your values along the way. I think regular resets, regular check-ins provide a renewed sense of motivation and energy and helps us stay on track and maintain discipline in moving towards your desired outcomes on the long run. And that's exactly what I want to walk you through today. I want to walk you a framework on how to do a mid-year reboot. First and foremost, please hit pause and go to the show notes of this podcast episode. There is a link for you to download a workbook that comes with this episode. This workbook is going to have all that you need to do your mid-year reboot, and I'm going to walk you through all of the exercises that are inside that workbook. If you, for whatever reason, cannot download the workbook, you can just grab a piece of paper, a notebook, a journal, and follow along. You can pause me anytime you want. The most important thing about today's episode is not that you listen to me and then move on and say, oh, that was a good episode. I felt inspired. My goal today really is to move you to action, to move you to actually do your own mid-year reboot. Even if you don't do all the exercises that I'm going to share with you, if you just do a couple of them, I would feel I was successful today. So let's give it a try. First of all, I want to explain the framework at a big picture, right? So what is this mid-year reboot? It's really an opportunity to check in, to reconnect with yourself, with your goals, with your focus, with your habits, and just think through and reflect so far how the year is going, ground ourselves in the present, and then look ahead and prepare for the second half of the year. So really, this reboot has 3 parts. The first part is looking back. It's about reflecting and taking stock on how things have been going so far, right? How far have you come so far this year? What are the things that you have accomplished so far this year? What is the inventory at the end of this 6 months? Then we're going to look around. We're going to spend some time cleaning our physical space, our digital space, so we can create an environment that kind of mirrors our energy to a sense, because our energy it's highly impacted by our surroundings. So we're going to set our surroundings to mirror the energy that we want to have for the remaining of the year. And then we're going to look ahead, right? We're going to prepare and plan and motivate ourselves for the upcoming 6 months of the year. So that's the framework, and there's a series of exercises that we're going to complete in each of these phases to help us accomplish all of that. So in order to get started with this mid-year reboot, a couple of tips, things that I would recommend so you can take the most out of doing a mid-year reboot. I think it's important to set aside some dedicated time for you to work through this exercise. And again, there is a workbook that comes with today's episode that you can download. It's completely free. You might also want maybe to schedule time in your calendar to block the actual time and have that time and space that you need to, it's basically make an appointment with yourself. I like to do this always on weekends, so this is something I'm doing personally doing this weekend. The second thing is you want to find a quiet space where you can really focus and you can reflect, where you don't have a lot of distractions, right? This exercise is not going to take a lot of time, but it requires focus time. Also, as I mentioned, as you don't need to complete all the exercises, nor you have to complete them all in one sitting. You might want to split this up in multiple days, and that is totally okay. You might want to skip an exercise, and that is completely okay. But I think one thing that is very important is that you are open with yourself throughout the process. See, growth often requires effort, but it also requires honesty and requires a willingness to step outside of your comfort zone. So some of these exercises, as you are reflecting either on the past, the present, or the future, they're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that is okay, and it's normal. It's part of the process. It's part of your personal growth. And lastly, one thing that I think is very important is have fun with it. See, personal growth is a journey. And while you will do some reflection and evaluation, this mid-year reboot should be something that you enjoy, that it's fun. So take time to celebrate your accomplishments, to remember all the steps that you've taken this far, all the progress that you've made this far, and think about how you're aligned with your personal values. And keep in mind that this is just a framework. It's a tool that it's meant to help you. And if there's any parts of it that are not helping you, again, you can skip them, you can adapt them, you can make changes. I'm just sharing the framework that I personally use in hopes that you find it helpful as well. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start by looking back, right? We're going to review our past 6 months. And this is the time where we are going to take some time to reflect on the last half of the year and what has worked well, what you want to carry forward for the second half of the year, and what hasn't worked. And you want to make some shifts in this coming season, right? In this second half of the year. So I'm going to suggest 3 questions to journal or think about. I personally like to journal, but you can just think about these things and not need to write them down. The first one is, what wins did you experience? What were your personal victories in the first half of the year? The second question is, what have been your biggest highlights? When you look back, the first half of the year, what are the highlights? If you could only share a few bullets on what are the highlights of the first half of 2024, what would those be? And then the last question is, what is currently not working for you? What are the things that are just not working, period? So let's break it down. The first exercise is about celebrating your wins. And I want you to really think over the last several months, what have been your biggest wins? And remember that while achieving large personal or professional goals is certainly a win, smaller and less flashy success also counts, right? We want to go after the big and the small wins. And I think all of them are worth celebrating and are worth and important to acknowledge. So think about all the things that you have accomplished, all your personal and professional wins, all the wins around all the areas of your life, right? Include personal growth, your goals, your well-being, your physical health, your relationships, your family, your career, your finances, any area of your life that is meaningful. What have been your biggest wins? And you have a page on this workbook, but you can write them down. If you don't have your workbook, you can just write them down on a piece of paper, right? Write them all down. There is no limit to the number of wins that you can write down on this exercise. Once you've listed them all, I want you, if you're writing them down, I want you to pick a highlighter and highlight the ones that you're most proud of. When you look back at the last 6 months, from all those wins that you listed, what are the ones that you're most proud of? I love this exercise and I love to start my mid-year or my quarterly check-ins doing this. I actually do this every week. Every week, seriously. I even have a group that I form with some friends where every Monday we check in with each other and we share what are our weekly wins. We also share what are our weekly intentions. And for me, it's really important to do that because we get so busy and so hung up on the day-to-day that we don't slow down to acknowledge our personal victories. Those small or big, doesn't matter the size, those private victories that we had during the week. A lot of times we go so fast through our days that at the end of the day we go to bed. And I don't know if you had felt like this and we're like, okay, what did I actually do today? The days go by and you get into this routine and you stop seeing those things. So it's important that once in a while we pause and we reflect. And there is something to be said about that personal pride that you have with the wins that you have, right? A lot of times we're thinking that the only win that is worth it is crossing the finish line. And you and I have talked about this multiple times, right? It's not about the finish line. You might never reach the finish line, or you might, and then realize that you don't feel any different, right? That didn't give you what you thought it was going to give you. The power is in the journey. And along the journey, there's going to be so many wins. Again, small or big, that are worth celebrating. And I don't know about you, but sometimes in the past, I was terrible at doing that. I was always looking at, okay, how far I am from that big finish line, and never acknowledge all the small little finish lines that I was crossing. Every time that I was stepping outside of my comfort zone, or that I did something for my physical health, or that I hit a milestone on a project, or that I accomplished something, or had a meaningful connection with someone, for example. So it is important to, on a regular basis, think about what are our victories. And if you don't have that habit, And if you struggle to think about the things that you're good at or the things that you have accomplished, I really want to invite you to at least do it now in this mid-year reboot, right? In this mid-year checking. Just think about what are all of those victories? What are all of those wins across all the areas of your life? The next exercise is to list your highlights. When you glance back at the few past months, which experiences stick out as most enjoyable to you? Which days, events, occurrences feel particularly special? What have been your highlights so far this year? And I want you to list all of them, right? What are all of those highlights? What are all those things that really stick out? That, I don't know, for me, there's been a few. One of the recent ones, as I shared on the previous podcast episode, was going back to Honduras after 17 years and having the honor of being the commencement speaker at the graduations in the university where I graduated. But also my son starting high school, for example, or our vacation to Dubai this year. All of those are highlights that have happened in this first half of the year for me. And what I want you to do after you have listed your highlights, and this shouldn't be that hard, right? If you need to think too hard to figure out what your highlights are, then maybe they're not highlights, right? These should be things that really stand out. But maybe one thing you can do to help you with this exercise is look at your calendar and every month and look at what happened in January, what happened in February. Were there any highlights in March or April or May or June? And every month try to think about what happened that month and was there any highlight. That really helps me a lot of times because sometimes I remember highlights and then I'm like, oh, but was that this year or was that last year? So that can be a good tip, right? Look month by month at your calendar and see, were there any significant events or situations that happened that month? And after you have listed all your highlights, I want you to think about, do you notice any common themes? Are there any elements that seem to pop up more than once? And why do you think these particular experiences were meaningful to you? What about these experiences made them meaningful? I hope you see where this is going, right? Having that awareness of what are those things and what are those elements and what are those things that make these your highlights is going to help you create your own formula to have more highlights in your life, to be more intentional once we get to looking forward into the future. Okay, now let's move to the second piece of this reboot, which is looking around. And this phase is about making shifts in your environment. See, after you've delved into the past, considering your wins and your highlights, maybe areas of growth, it's time to take a look at the space that surrounds you at the present moment. And this portion of the mid-year reboot is all about looking at your space around you and cleaning and clearing your physical and digital environments. For many people, physical spaces drastically impact their internal state. I'm one of those people. And taking time to clean and refresh your environment can promote a feeling of calm and clarity. When you're conducting a reboot, it can be tempting to try to tackle everything at once, but it's often most useful to narrow your focus to 1 or 3 high impact areas to minimize feeling overwhelmed, and that can make it easy to actually get started. So to complete this exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to choose 1 or 3 high impact places to clean, to declutter, and to refresh in our personal space. And when you look at the different areas and you're trying to pick one, I want you to consider both physical and digital areas that have the biggest impact for you at the moment, right? And then you can come back and do this as many times as you want. But I think a lot of times, especially if you're a little bit unorganized in your spaces like me, it can feel overwhelming to do everything at once. So on the workbook, I created a list of places or ideas that you might want to consider addressing. Like, for example, your bookshelf where you have all your books. I know I keep piling books and sometimes it's a mess, right? Then I can never find the book that I'm looking for. Your closet, but also can be your to-do list. Are you disciplined with your to-do list, or is it a mess? Are there things there that are 6 months old and things that have already been done that you never checked off that to-do list? So that can be one. Your desk or your workspace, that's a big one for me because that's where I spent most of my time during the day. It could be your everyday bag or your backpack. It could be your social media accounts, your Instagram or your Facebook or your LinkedIn. It could be any digital storage or your files in your computer. It could be maybe your personal care items or your kitchen pantry or fridge. Or it could be, I don't know, your home screen in your phone or your computer. Or your catch-all drawer. I think we all have one of those. So pick an area, 1 to 3 areas that are most impactful to you, and take some time to just declutter and, and organize it. And for me, what works best is to set aside a specific time in my calendar to tackle that, right? And depending on the scope of your project, you might designate an hour or maybe a full day, right? And we're working through that space that you've chosen. Try to envision the energy that you want to call into your life. Imagine it filling your physical space and your digital environment. What is the energy that you want to feel now and for the rest of the year? And how can you clean up and organize this space so it gives you that vibe of that energy that you want to have right now? And that's really what this piece of the reboot is about. For me, I always pick a combination. I pick always like one physical space and one digital space. So for me, typically my go-tos are my working space. It's the desktop on my computer or my phone. I look through what apps can I now delete that are not longer serving me. Or I do a social media audit and I look at, okay, I want to clean up my feed. What are things that I want to see more that are really inspiring me in a positive way? And what are things that create negative feelings like comparison, for example? And I want to mute those accounts or unfollow those accounts. And that is an exercise I like to do a couple of times throughout the year. And this can be a great time during this mid-year reboot. The next thing is looking ahead. And that is the last block of this mid-year reboot. And this is all about preparing for the next half of the year. It's about planning and preparing and also pumping yourself up for the months to come. So there's 4 themes or 4 prompts that we're going to tackle in this block. One is we're going to select one word of intention for the second half of the year. The second one, we're going to create a visual collage to represent the new energy we want to invite for the remaining of the year. 3, we're going to choose a new book that we're going to read. And 4, we're going to schedule future highlights. So let's dive into this. So we're moving to exercise number 5. This is the 5th exercise in this reboot. If you have your workbook, all of this is on your workbook. And this is about choosing a word of intention, which can be a powerful way to set the tone for your growth over the second half of the year. This word is going to serve you as a simple guiding light or compass to keep in mind as you navigate the next 6 months of the year and to take action towards your goals. I personally, if you follow me for some time, you know that I always have a word for the year. I pick my power word of the year, and I do that at the beginning of the year. And my word for this year is vibrant. That is the word that I picked for 2024. And as we do this mid-year reboot, this is not replacing that power word, but this is more an intention word, right? What is my intention for the next 6 months? See, my power word has guided me so far this year in terms of what I'm focused on, what I'm prioritizing, where I'm putting my time. Because time is a limited resource, right? And every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. So having this power word for me, there's a lot of work behind coming up with this power word. It's really helping me decide what I say yes to and what I say no to during the year. Now, let's talk about this intention word and how to choose one word of intention. I want you to consider a few things. The first thing is I want you to reflect on your current situation. So take some time to reflect on where you are in your life right now. What are the areas that you would like to improve, to change, to give greater attention to? You might want to revisit some of the exercises that we did earlier when one of the prompts, the third prompt that we discussed, that was what's not working right now. So think about what is not working right now, and also your wins, right? But what is your current situation? Then I want you to identify the energies that have been serving you well so far this year. Think about the values, the wins, the highlights that you've had in the first half of the year. What of that energy do you want to carry forward into the second half of the year? And you might want to revisit the first two prompts, right? Your wins and your highlights. What is the energy that surrounded those things that you want to carry forward for the remaining of the year? And then choose a word, a single word that encapsulates your intention. Or, in other words, the energy that you want to call upon for the next 6 months. Your word can be a verb like create or connect, or it can be a word like courageous or grateful, or it can be a noun like growth or balance. Here are some words in your workbook that you'll find that you might want to consider for inspiration: abundance, alignment, authentic, balance, becoming, bold, breathe, bright, calm, celebrate, centered, change, connect, creativity, delight, devotion, discipline, dream, embrace, emerge, empower, expand, focus, freedom, glow, grace, gratitude, grounded, hope, integrity, intentional, intuition, joy, learn, listen, love, mindful, move, nature, nourish, nurture, organized, peace, powerful, persistent, present, release, simplicity, thrive, smile, tranquility, whole. Those are some examples that can help you as inspiration. Again, I know I read them very quickly, but all of those words are inside your workbook. So if you haven't downloaded yet, what are you waiting for? The link can be found on the show notes of today's podcast episode. And then once you have chosen your word, I want to invite you to write it down and put it somewhere where you can see it regularly. This might be a Post-it note on your computer, or maybe you create a background for your computer that contains this word, or maybe you put it on the fridge door or on the lock screen on your phone. Put it somewhere that you can see it regularly, because this is the word that is going to remind you how you want to show up for the remaining of the year. Okay, moving along. The next exercise is to design a visual collage. One thing I love to do at the end of the year is to create a vision board. This is a little bit different, right? This is a collage that encapsulates the emotions that you want to feel. It's very different than your traditional vision board. This one is not about manifesting or thinking about the things that you want, that you aspire to have. Instead, this one calls and collects and invites you to reflect on how you want to feel, which in many ways is sometimes even more impactful, right? Consider the pictures, the colors, the symbols that spark the emotion inside of you that you would like to experience, that might be related to that intention word that you just picked, right? And in your workbook, I have 5 steps on how to create this collage. And I'm not going to go through them in the podcast, but think about a collage of images, right? Colors, words, pictures, that when you see it, it evokes that energy that you want to feel. And then download the workbook and see the instructions and create your own, or you don't even have to follow the instructions. Just get inspired and create a vision. The next thing we want to do is we want to choose a new book to read, but not just any book. I want you to select a book that relates to a habit that you want to build, a goal that you want to achieve, or a feeling that you want to experience. For many people, this takes the form of a nonfiction or a personal development book, but it doesn't have to be. You can use Google or Goodreads to search for books that are related to the intention that you've selected. And if you want some inspiration to pick a book, on the workbook, and I also will put it separately on the show notes of today's podcast episode, I have a link to some of my favorite books. Most of them are, if not all, are nonfiction books. That's the books that I like to read, more of these nonfiction, personal development kind of books. So if you're looking for some inspiration, go check out that link. And then the last exercise is to schedule future highlights. It's all too easy to get caught up in the mundane routines, especially as your calendar fills up with work activities and social events and family commitments. And this is your chance to ensure that you don't accidentally go the next 6 months without making time to what you actually enjoy. So now is the perfect time and opportunity to look back at the list of experiences that you made in the exercise where you highlight your highlights, and to schedule more of those in the future. That's why I asked you, what do these things have in common? Do you see a theme about all these highlights that you have identified in the first half of the year? And how can you create more of those in the second half? And not only how can you create them, but actually schedule them. You know, when considering your past experiences, notice those similar threats. Do you tend to prefer things that you do by yourself or things that you do with others? Are these more quiet kind of activities? Are these more active, adrenaline pumping kind of activities? Like, what do they have in common? And consider scheduling, 3 to 6 experiences. At least, once every other month. Have one of experience that brings you joy. You'll want to have enough to look forward to without having too many that it feels overwhelming. So pick anywhere between 3 and 6 experiences that you want to schedule from now until the end of the year. And then on your workbook, I have included like a month calendar template that you can use to schedule those activities. And that's it. That is your mid-year reboot. This is a very powerful way to enter the second half of the year refreshed and energized. And if you take the time to complete these exercises, let me tell you that you've taken a significant step towards cultivating a more balanced and a more intentional life. And again, while these exercises were designed to be a mid-year reboot, that's how I framed this whole exercise, you can go back to these exercises individually at any time that you need just a reset or a refresh. See, there is a quote from Jim Rohn that I really like, that I think it's a great way of closing out today's session. Actually, two, and they're both from Jim Rohn. One says, "You cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction overnight." And I think this exercise is really focused on thinking about the direction, right? And your intention and the energy that you want to bring to the second half of the year. And the second quote is, or says, "Your life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change." And taking time to reflect and be intentional about the change that you want to make in your life can really make a difference in the way you experience your life. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you found this exercise helpful. I would love to hear your experience going through this exercise too. So please feel free to reach out to me through any of my social media accounts, or if you know me in person, send me a note or call me and share how this exercise worked for you. I would love to hear what your experience is, and I really hope that this helps you to reconnect again with yourself and recalibrate and refocus and regain energy and motivation to keep going for the remaining of the year. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I can't wait to talk to you again next week on another episode of the Leading Yourself podcast. Have a great week. Okay, my friend, that's all I've got for you today. But before you go, 2 quick reminders. Number 1, if we're not already friends on Instagram, let's get connected. You can find me as Leading Yourself Podcast. Number 2, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am incredibly grateful that you're in this journey with me. I want to leave you with one last thought. I want to remind you that you're destined for more, and that every step that you take brings you closer to becoming that best version of yourself. Embrace each day as a chance to learn, grow, and chase your dreams. The world needs you to shine brightly, so go out and show up fully and authentically. Take care, and I'll see you next time.